12 years ago, I quit my job at a Fortune 500 company. I was working at Viacom Media Networks in Los Angeles. Yes. It's pretty unsustainable, the pace I was making. I realized the world wasn't making sense anymore. So I moved with my family to a small town in Montana. Got a 20-acre ranch. And I'm gay and I'm black. And oddly enough, I found myself surrounded by mostly white, mostly Republican, mostly Christian, gun-toting people who welcomed me, treated me with kindness and respect. And that was the moment I realized that we really weren't as divided as we realized, that we actually have a lot more in common than we believed. And that set me on a journey where I discovered the losing division.
And it's not a thin book.
It's not a thin book. It's meaty. There's a lot to dig in. I believe that there are numerous influences that are keeping us from recognizing our common bonds. Political opportunists, media hacks, professional activists, all of them are working to create a distorted reality. It keeps us from seeing that America is at a crossroads. We're losing our freedoms. We're losing our bodily autonomy.
Yeah, no one's really got.
Most of all, we're losing respect for our way of life.
Is the closest now.
We're told that if we believe in what America stands
do have
for,
an agenda,
that
but
we're
as
white
far as, like,
supremacists. If we support free
engaging
speech,
like agenda, no agenda,
we're supporting
none of the
hate.
other sort of
We're being asked to
organized
forget
groups
why
have really
America
had much
was
impact.
born,
Yes, they have
and the values
agenda,
that
and they're
we all
having a
share,
significant
and that should matter to all of
impact.
us. So that's really what prompted me to write this book.
Is there do you have a unique angle that would be different, say, from Carol Swain, for instance?
I'm not familiar with Carol Swain.
Okay. Or Tom Sullivan.
I did not know that Thomas was addressing this particular issue. I haven't followed Thomas in a while. I know he's an economist, but
So what's your angle on it?
what's my
Well, I would say gimmick, but your perspective.
Well, my perspective is that social justice, or I should say DEI, is being used as a red herring to keep us from seeing the brewing class war that poses an existential crisis or a threat to
Who is
America.
imposing this DEI? That all the Democratic state governments.
No, you're right. You're right.
Who is putting this forward? How is this getting sold in?
Well, I don't know that it's coming from a particular source. I think if we really look back and trace the roots, we can see that DEI has been, I think, in the works for decades.
Right.
Certainly when I was at Princeton, I saw it emerging. I didn't appreciate the scope that it would eventually attain.
You're right.
But I think it's like a cultural zeitgeist that's taken hold and really taken on a life of its own. But it actually is benefiting people much higher up the food chain, further up the food chain. So I'm not suggesting it's anything conspiratorial or anything, but I do think it's something we all need to pay close attention to now.
Do you reference Barack Obama's administration in some way?
Well, I went to school with Barack, really nice guy, not someone I supported for president.
At Columbia? Where did you go to?
Harvard Law. Voted for him as president of the Harvard Law Review. And, I was happy to support the first black president of the Law Review. But I did not have confidence that he appreciated the problems that our country was facing in 2008. There was a subprime crisis that was brewing. He seemed largely not in tune with that.
You do that.
I had some doubts as to whether. I had a lot of my friends are black, obviously, and they had high hopes that he would lift the black community to a different place. We've been voting Democrat for decades. We really weren't making much progress as a community. I think a lot of people had high expectations for Barack, and looking back, those expectations weren't met. And I sort of knew that from the beginning. What I knew about Barack, nice guy, didn't seem like the kind of person who was going to really make an effort to advance the condition of black people.
Do you think his parents' communist leanings have made an impression that a worldview that he might be trying to implement?
I'm not. You know what? That's interesting. I wasn't aware that his parents had communist leanings. I had no.
Each of us here
That's
attacks
news.
our own
That's news to me.
specific kind of praise. Yeah.
What's your kind?
I'll have to get some thought.
I get
thought
the
to that.
libertarian.
And I don't know that
people,
Barack was.
fedoras,
I don't know that he was
Yeah.
advocating a
living in
communist
their mom's
agenda.
basement.
Jeffrey.
Yeah, Jeffrey.
Well, not overtly.
Jeffrey's-
Not overtly.
Jeffrey pulls it off.
Not overtly. I mean, it could. I guess one could argue that some of the policies that he pursued, like Obamacare,
Jeffrey and I go back a long way.
He has a,
might have supported a more collectivist
Yeah.
agenda.
Jeffrey
I don't know if
can
that
pull
was
off things that
intentional or
other
not.
people-
It was just an unintended consequence. But yeah, I can't really speak to
that's
that.
interesting. That's your.
I think he was performing over there.
Use Barack as an example.
That's
Yes.
your kind of. I don't know what my kind
Although
is.
there's this division, and
I'm not sure what my
it's being
specific
fomented,
kind of
Equal opportunity.
mostly
But I was saying, back with
again, on
So I
blacks
teach
towards whites.
first
you
year
don't
college
see that much
So
of whites
although
towards
my
blacks.
students,
There's not that,
my
there's
kids,
not more
were
racism
young
in the
enough
country
right
now.
Oh, I actually think there's far less racism in the country now than there was like 20 years ago. And interestingly enough, when Barack was elected, one of my concerns was that the racial divide would widen. And I had this conversation with my partner, and she said, "How can you say that? You know, this is like a healing moment for the country. This is when we all come together." And I said, "I'll never forget." I said, "If we constantly refer to him as the first black president, we're not transcending race. We're using race as a lightning rod.
Which is fine. He's lived with.
We should be, and if anything, we should be referring to him as the first biracial president because he is half black and half white. But that's not what we did. We made him the first black president, and we did that to make some white people feel good about electing a black man. We did it to make some black people feel good about having a black man in office. But we didn't think about how that would be perceived by the white population at large. And I personally feel, I think any person with common sense looking back would see that the racial divide has been wider since Barack
So I mean, with the kids, where
was
it's
in office
like, okay,
than
so
it
the
was
college experience
when George
still
Bush
being
was in office. And
compromised
let's
with
face it,
COVID
George Bush was not
restrictions.
a warm and
There
cuddly
you can
guy when it comes to
understand,
race
like, why they're
race
not
relations.
having a good time in
So
college, why they're
I think
struggling.
the best of intentions
Even
sort of
now, when all
backfired.
that stuff's gone. The
What
college
about the
experience
Alinsky rule
about as normal as
for
it could
social
be.
change and
Yeah.
Oh
revolution?
my
Still
goodness.
seems
I have to
students
say, I don't know much
struggling.
about the Alinsky rules. I can't.
Tremendous.
You know a lot. You can educate me.
Well, Barack could have educated us
Anxiety,
both.
depression.
I mean,
okay.
we're seeing it in
Failure
terms
to
of dividing the
understand
Rules for
basic
radicals.
social-
Right, divide, turn populations against each other.
Well, I mean, if you really think that that's happening, and it could be, it's bigger than Barack. I mean, there are forces that are turning our population against each other. As I said, the media.
Yeah.
Are they subscribing to rules for radicals
Yeah.
I think
as well? I mean, I think there's.
if it becomes part of the party narrative
This is one of my issues.
that the system is systemically racist.
Okay, so this is what I'd like to consider. Maybe it's not an ism. Maybe it's not communism or socialism or any of these isms. I happen to believe that elites who've, let's face it, controlled the planet for thousands of years, I don't think they subscribe to any particular political philosophy. I think they will use any political philosophy that's convenient at the moment. And it could be now that elites, I'm not saying Barack, but people with much deeper pockets may be steering our country in a certain way and using rules for radical or the Alinsky ideology to do it. That's a possibility.
The fate of parents everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. But they're friends.